Oh, hi there. Bobby Ogilvy, EQ coach and tech COO. So, today's question, what is positive leadership? It is the intersection of positive psychology and leadership. So, when you hear positive psychology, what do you think of? The classic thing everyone seems to think of is the PERMA model, Seligman's PERMA model. But there's a lot more going on than that. And even Seligman, every 10 or so years, updates the model he's using because he's realized it's become insufficient, it starts to become too loaded. And the other thing I would say is there's lots of other great researchers, whether we're talking about emotional intelligence or something else about wellness and resilience or ways to induce happiness. And I would say, too, there's also this whole realm of positive psychology research, which is both validating and debunking little spiritual techniques or like little happiness, supposed happiness habits, right? And also just trying to parse out basically the good from the bad, the wheat from the chaff in terms of um, do these things actually have an impact? I think so. You can actually find Martin Seligman has what is it, something like a Foundations of Positive Psych online course somewhere. Maybe it's Coursera, but anyway, it's one of the big MOOC providers online. Massive open online course. So you can go through that one if you want to get a better taste of some of this stuff. But what could positive leadership mean? So we know transformational leadership is pretty well established, empirically speaking, right? There's a realm of uh, more recent leadership types which are still gaining credibility, and some have yet to do it, or some are still gaining evidence. I know when I asked an HR prof about 5 years ago or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, about authentic leadership, the way he framed it is that it doesn't currently resonate with the literature, and that it's known, but it's not yet empirically supported, right? And that may have, I haven't done a recent kind of survey of authentic leadership, so as much as I totally agree with it in philosophy, from an empirical standpoint, I think we're still cultivating evidence, even though I think it's a bit better at this point. I think adaptive leadership is a bit more useful in that it's a bit more operationalizable in terms of, let's call it, management making decisions. Um, this would be a good point to kind of fall back on one point I've made in previous videos, is kind of the difference between management and leadership philosophies. Uh, Broadly speaking, I would say leadership philosophies are trying to say, here are your priorities you should place attention on, you should place priority on, and thus decision making priority on, right? So transformational leadership wants it to be about cultivating talent and then delegating out to others to build capacity over time, and this wants this and this wants that. So where's my priority and attention? And then management aspects are trying to give you a step-by-step process or a contingency of how you should handle certain problems or things, whether we're talking at an individual level or an overall team and function kind of decision-making level, right? So in that sense, at their best, they're kind of philosophy agnostic, and they're kind of to say, if this, then that, right? And that might be a bit too heavy-handed because it's smushing all of them into a kind of contingency model, or I'm trying to remember the name of the model, which is very, what is it, LMX, leader member exchange, right? Transactive, right? Um, and both of them are needed. They certainly have their point. That's also a reason why I would say I'm an EQ coach and a tech COO, right? Because I, I always want that operational zest of being involved in good companies and startups and doing the kind of real team consulting, team coaching kind of work, but then also having enough background in EQ and positive leadership, and the kind of people talent transformation end of things, that you're both kind of getting the essential heart and potential of how you can build up people, but you're also getting the operational crunch, and you're not becoming too loaded one way or the other. I when I look at the management theories, particularly out of the 80s and early 90s, they struck me as very emotionally and spiritually stark systems that had become obsessed with maybe process management or profit optimization, something like that. And they're very proud of themselves for that, but they're very rigid, and they tend to take a very myopic view, and really they're assuming really a certain niche type of sector. And so, yeah, if you're talking about medium and large enterprise industrial manufacturing, yeah, maybe lean process management is the solution you want, or was the solution you wanted 20 years ago. But to assume that that is the right answer for all organizations and strategic situations is just blind and stupid. And in fact, I would say in an ever more VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous, um, the the change management, the complexity management of agile, as well as the people engagement, the cultural engagement, and you could think of the marginal purpose and productivity engagement of agile. It's just the winner, right? Um, anyway, so again, management philosophies are born out of certain sectors and certain eras because those were the kind of salient business needs in certain places at the time. So um, you know, don't too broadly cut too wide of a swath for them and say, yeah, it fits for all these cases. No, it does not. Anyway, back to positive leadership. Um, Often I'm looking for impact, or I'm looking at things on the three size levels of the individual level. What can you do as a person, whether you're a leader or not, but how can you bring out your best as a person? And this is the best starting point because, so if you think here in terms of eudaimonic happiness, it leverages your strength and it leverages some things that you can have direct control over, right? So one step up from that is on the team level, the teams that you're a part of, and whether you're in some leadership position, management position or not. Just think of the day-to-day people you interact with, right? In a kind of operational sense, that's a good way to think of your team, right? Regardless of what formally it says you're interacting with. I would, in that sense, very much say that when you're dealing with a project or you're part of some normal operations team, it's not just the people that are directly in your unit, but the people that you have to commonly liaise with, right? So if yeah, maybe you're part of a sales team, but you need to continually deal with the system administrator of the CRM you're dealing with, and there's configuration and system implementation issues, right? Then that person is functionally they're a part of your team. They're a relationship you need to manage. So of course there are you know more effective and useful and less effective and useful ways of handling that, like anything, right? The important thing on this relatedness on this team level is that you can still have one-to-one interactions, right? You're still dealing with leadership as or management as a one-to-one problem, right? Individual choices, transactions, behaviors can affect this directly. And then when you're dealing with I shouldn't say the top level, but the biggest scope of leadership, it's a one-to-many relationship, because there will be times when you are, in a one-directional sense, dealing with lots of people, or so a lot of people are impacted by what you're doing or some decision you have, or the opposite. You are the recipient of someone else's choices, right? Um, and of course, in a high-level sense of uh, big complex organizations with lots of different experts, right? This makes sense. If you have a CTO with 20 years of engineering experience, and you don't, of course, they're going to be the person you want deciding your tech strategy, your product development strategy and roadmap, and how that's going to relate to funding and all sorts of other things. And it would be you want them having those big decisions for lots of people, because you're not the expert who should be making those kinds of decisions, right? You have your own scope and wheelhouse of decisions you should be making, right? And of course, then having that one-to-many relationship. Um, so you could see how okay, so maybe let's deal with these three levels, then how the happiness types might fit into that in terms of positive leadership. Um, so Chaironic happiness, one of the gifts that come out of this is better sense of perspective, hopefully kind of wisdom and good judgment that comes out of transcending yourself, getting a moment to moment and intentional and an emotional practice out of getting inside your own perspective. um, One, just cultivating hanging out in nothingness and space and ambiguity, but two, perspective taking in new ways. And so what is the real gift of that? It's strategic agility. So particularly if you are an executive, if you're someone that has big strategic scope in terms of impacting things or planning out the future and understanding what's going on in your market and your kind of context, Chaironic happiness is really important. So I know that a lot of executives might see this as kind of touchy-feely, but think of how much of your work isn't a momentary thing about do this thing right now or else things are going to explode, but is a constant steering things in the right direction, right? Which means a constant error checking of, am I bringing enough perspectives, enough impact areas and things to bear, and have I found the right kind of tactical decision making answer, which is going to step by step steer this group of people, this group of resources and forces and kind of mission in the right direction, right? That's what you're doing. Um, Probably if your time scope and your operational impacts are shorter than that, you're probably more in a management mode, a project management, or a kind of business manager kind of mode, right? Um, yeah. So this might also be a point when we would throw out, okay, so what's the opposite of positive leadership? Well, one rubric we can use to look at that would be the tribal leadership model, right? So we got our 5 levels in that, and you've heard me say this in other videos, right? So what's my purpose? I use EQ coaching and psychometrics to transform lone wolf leaders into pack protectors, and I do that by boosting their vitality, their empathy, their grit or willpower, and ultimately their noble purpose. And then this has a lot of great impacts in terms of team agility and engagement. So that is very key to the 3rd to 4th level jump in the tribal leadership model. It's you're going from lone wolf to this kind of team tribal, this partnership level, and then hopefully, well, and really, I would say a lot of that is some of the eudaimonic areas, but particularly in terms of ethics. How are you relating to others, and meaning? And then if we're talking about the 4th to 5th level jump, I would say the big difference there is, from a set mission that this team needs, or else the team is going to explode and stop surviving, to and again these charonic pieces of transcending your viewpoint so you can have a more creative, opportunistic sense of what might be possible and how we can create bigger scale win-wins are more sustainable over longer periods of time. And that requires being able to step outside of the myopia of your own short-term mission, right? Okay, so I was talking about what's the opposite of positive leadership. So back to those first 2 levels, the first 2 levels of disengagement, right? Remember that the second level is basically that they don't have any eudaimonic happiness because they don't know what their strengths are. They don't really have an area that they're they're good at, or at an existential level, it's like they're not taking responsibility for anything. And it's like, listen, if you don't know what you're good at, if you don't have any engagement kind of gas in your tank, motivation gas in your tank, if you're not taking responsibility, there's really no way to apply your skills. And then so then really the gift they have is they start to realize there can be a link between their choices and actions and their outcomes and their things they can do. And oh my God, right? But most people in the workforce at least have some degree of that. I'm not saying it could get better because most people could stand to be way more engaged and particularly work in the area of pursuing noble purpose, right? But most people have some working sense of that. But we all know, but really, again, 25% of our population is in those bottom first 2 categories, right? So they are to varying degrees disengaged. So then what's the difference between the level 1 and level 2? Well, both of them are disengaged, except for the level 1 person is even worse off because it's not just that they individually don't know where to take action. They don't know where to take action, and they're resentful that other people are succeeding. They're spiteful, right? They want to cause, they want to be the stick in the mud, which is causing problems for others, and it's very antagonistic and passive aggressive and subversive. Um, it's not like they have a better idea. They're supplanting or substituting or their own take on things. It's a very juvenile attitude, or it can often be in that sense a very diluted attitude, right? You can it often has childish undertones in terms of what they expect from others and how much they want to be unaccountable themselves, right? Uh, and the reason you don't see a lot of this in the professional end of things is that a lot of these people really don't even have careers. On the other end of things, we all know some people which are, you've seen this over, maybe this kind of fully comes out over time, or I'll be a little backhanded here. I think a lot of public sector is like this because it tends to really um, have a very risk averse mindset. So at its best, it may have some smart trained people, maybe not, but they're not rewarded for good behaviors they're taking, and they're punished for missteps, right? And so they get into this very cliquey, no change bureaucratic culture where they don't want change, they don't want results, they don't want to be key toward results, and you are certainly not going to make them be accountable and responsible for anything, right? And then when you have a group of them reinforcing each other, you can see how that becomes problematic. That really becomes a combination of level 1 and level 2 because it's an individual problem, but it starts to become kind of a group culture norm problem, and that is certainly not the kind of positive leadership, the positive culture that you guys want. Anyway, so this just gives you kind of a snapshot of how understandings of how to cultivate different EQ competencies and the different types of happiness then all come together when you're thinking about positive leadership, and that fits on the individual level of best self. This fits on the team level of relating to others and how to bring out the most in people around you and yourself and the teams you're part of. And this fits on the full organizational level of the one to many relationships that you're a part of. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, these are really new emerging fields, so if you have a take of what you would like to see positive leadership go towards or a great example you want to share with us, that would be fantastic. So again, I'm Bobby Ogilvy, EQ coach and tech COO, and I'll talk to you guys soon.